The Court of Public Opinion is a part of the Amateur Radio Network. You know, after listening to several stories and video, I can tell you there are some stories that are worse than others. We've got that far, okay? And I really don't think after you listen to the story about Kendall and Dr. Phil goes into, well, it basically opens it up and he tries to caution the audience about what she shared really with the world about her experience as a victim of human trafficking survivor, actually. I want to tell you that when we discuss this, I know that there are parts of us that just still are getting a grip on all this. It's not, I mean, even for somebody who's lived through it or been around it, or somebody that's seen it or witnessed it, you understand that every person that's been around some form of psychological mental abuse involves isolation. It's part of the cycle. In fact, if you're around people that continually participate in it, some people just can't get away from it. And there are some of them, they had to witness it all their life. They watch one of their siblings take abuse on a regular basis. Some will never talk about it because there's a level of loyalty. I don't understand. It's just as, to me, makes the comparison to mafia. And I can make that comparison, and I can say that in all honesty. Too many people have glorified others. And to me, there is a glorification. Some people, it's like, wow, that person was somebody important. You know what? Probably the most important person in our lives today are the victims that survived the abuse, and they don't even know that. They don't recognize that they cannot comprehend that somebody could actually care about them and love them. They can't. It's not that they can't. It's just they're not there yet. They haven't really survived, or maybe they may never fully get a grip of that until really we pray. We really pray. Because I saw in the eyes a tormented soul when I was listening to Kendall share her story. And I would say, having really witnessed some things in my own experience and having gone through a lot of things personally, that, I mean, I'm 46 now, and a lot of us have shared stories, and we're starting to get a grip on this as time goes on. And please understand, not everybody's quite there. They first of all, I think when you realize the emotions and the time we're investing, every story hits you differently at different times. And I can tell you, I'm just glad I was in a somewhat of a good spot to recognize it didn't take over me emotionally when I'm listening to the story. It just doesn't, at one point, it's like, this doesn't seem real that this girl survived this. But on one hand, it's like, there's a part of you that says, is this how really bad they are? And because most of us, the average person may not have ever seen. But now, by today's standards, many of us recognize abuse for what it is. It's just plain and simple. I mean, it doesn't have, we don't have to prove anything. Much of our society has been conditioned to pretend like this isn't happening. If you entertain your society with movies and books, and you just glorify fantasy, then nothing seems real. The fantasy seems more real. And I was sharing this, a post on the Facebook page that Hitler once said, if you tell a lie long enough, it sounds more believable. Or if you tell the lie, you could tell the greatest lie and that sounds more believable. Because everything's built on fantasy and movies and TV shows. There was a time, I believe, the TV didn't dominate your household. In fact, somebody mentioned this, and I didn't really get a grip of this, and I can fully get a grip now, but that most people put their TV in the center of the room, where it used to be that you had a coffee table and chairs and people sat around. Now you don't even have that anymore. You don't have somebody, most people that live alone and isolated or alone are the elderly, a lot of singles that are been divorced, single moms. More people are alone than ever before. And some people will tell me, and you'll convince me that it's okay to be single and alone. And I tell you, you're either very consumed with the TV in your life, because if you shut all those things off, all you got is yourself. And I have to tell you, at one point or another, people have to get a grip, okay? When you're elderly, have no family, and these foster children are just disposable, and there's a portion of society that has only recognizes that no, that's not their reality. Well, yeah, some people have made it in life and some people haven't, but a good majority of people haven't quite made it. They're just barely getting by on food stamps. I mean, this is not really how it was supposed to be, but this is how it's become. And somebody said, well, look they're all living thug life. You know what? I would not glorify thug life. I wouldn't glorify mafia lifestyle. I wouldn't glorify a lick of this. Okay? There's nothing good about glorifying lifestyles that have promoted women to be hoes and bitches and prostitutes. And nothing about that entertains me. It never did. And I worked around R&B and urban radio. And I saw how some people treat each other, both men and women, black and white. And if you had nothing to offer them, you had nothing to offer them. You didn't make it. You didn't get promoted. You were better off flipping burgers. And honestly, in some ways, you are better off. And all those kids that you hear about that all went to California or Hollywood to make it, they would say, I would never want this for anybody. That's all true. It's all true. So while they're trying to sell all these dreams and tell you, hey, you want to be important, heck, there's obviously from what we're learning, there's a downside to it. In fact, being promoted by the world standards, it doesn't mean nothing. The world in its promotion, like, oh, you made it in this world, you met it, you're the cream of the crop. But look, it gets lonely at top, okay? And look, the world is more lonely, more depressed than ever. And the best thing that could happen to some of us is some of us may have made a few friends because as a result of what happened to some of these people. And we're that support system. We're those people that can have the capacity for human compassion. We have the capacity to care about other people. I had a phenomenal day, and let me share with you how good it's getting. It's getting better and better. Believe it or not, as these stories start to break and as we're learning more and we're trying to hurdle one story after another, and you're going to, I would be prepared for anyone to be prepared that the stories are starting to come out. The survivors are going to start sharing. And we have created this like big group therapy here. So if you feel compelled to share your story, please do so. You have our ear, you have our time. We're here for you. If you feel compelled to share it, I recognize that while this doesn't seem like group therapy, it can be very much like that. I hope you feel safe enough to open up. And when you start to open up and you share little by little, if you have survived sexual abuse, or if you survived being a child abuse victim, or you suffered as a result of maybe foster care or social services program, any of those things that may have happened to you, you're welcome to open to us at whatever you can and however you decide to. The one thing you are going to recognize is that all of us, to some degree or another, in these threads have either witnessed or experienced something that falls in line with abuse. Some of us may have been in one capacity, lived through it, and some people that and I don't know who you all are personally. I've not ever met some of you, but I'm reading some of your posts and I study up and I'm learning. Now, if you would have told me in 1985 that I would be saying the things I'm saying, I didn't have the capacity to open up to anybody. In fact, it wasn't until 2009 that people asked me why I didn't open up about what happened to me. And I honestly did not believe that I would have had a normal life. But actually, if I had opened up, if I had recognized that people were going to accept me, I would have probably opened up much sooner. But when I share my story with a lot of people, I didn't recognize. I actually tried to put on the best face and live as normal as I could. People said, you're the only person that kept smiling. But that smile was frozen on my face like so many of you here. And what happened at home was another story. When I came home and I found my foster mother trapping my sister into a corner for 3 hours. And finally we got the attention of a caseworker who actually got fired for doing her job. And we ended up in a second foster home. Listen, over my lifetime, and one of the things that I hope people get, and it's critical, that there are good foster parents that do mean well. I don't know that they understand how they kind of fit in all of it, but there are people, very few, that I've met that really care to the degree that they'll go over and above for their foster children, okay? And adopt and do the right thing. But of all those few foster parents that I've met in my lifetime, at one point or another, they either went on and did their own thing and, life goes on, okay? But for the ones that didn't do the right one, for the groups that didn't, they profited, yes. There's a lot of people, they were promoted. And listen, the whole point, the whole story, and the whole cycle of abuse is about promotion. Because there's always going to be people that are going to watch and witness it. And this is where that whole word comes in, ratting people out. That's not what it's about. No one should ever stick around and witness abuse and not say something. The idea that someone would promote or demean somebody for sharing it, I mean, it's not a controlled environment at all. Listen, when somebody starts saying, hey, I don't like how I'm being treated, and if we have the capacity to do something to change it, we're going to do it. I mean, I'm not going to be afraid to live in an environment where I have to keep that kind of secret. See, your secrets are only as sick as you keep them. And let me tell you, no one wants to stick around to be abused the rest of their life or be around subtle psychological abuse. Over a period of time, it doesn't do anything but hurt everybody. And I've heard people say, well, you shouldn't have said anything. Well, wait a second. Listen to me. If you don't say something, it'll just continue. And I don't know that I can live around people that are going to accept this form of treatment. Whether I agree with it or not, it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable that anyone wouldn't say anything. And to call anybody for going along with the abuse, and those people have the moral authority to go along with it, there's a problem there. It's all about promotion. I want you to understand. That's why they call it civil rivalry. Why do you call it civil rivalry? Because there's always somebody that's playing favorites over one. How do you think people are promoted through society? It's so much part of conditioning. They condition kids to believe in that they're better than these kids. These kids are better than that. It's not. Listen, I get where people say, well, we don't want to reward these kids because they didn't earn it. No, I'm not saying you reward bad behavior. That's not what I'm saying. But there is a portion of our society that has rewarded some kids and they completely are turned off by the others. I mean, that's just the system in which we live in. You'd think we lived in a caste system. Oh, well, you're upper middle class, you're rich, you're poor, you're connected, you're not connected. Those things don't really matter in the big scheme of things, because I've met some very well-off people that are real jerks. I met also very decent people who had money, who did the right thing. You know what I mean? It really... This idea that somehow you're not rich enough, you're not pretty enough. I mean, really, God has made you unique. He's created you for a purpose. He loves and cares for you. You're unique in your own way. God created everyone unique in their own unique characteristics and their own gifts and talents. There's not one mistake that has been made. Now, that's not to say that that we don't make mistakes. The thing is, there was no mistake when you were born. Okay, that's not a mistake. You're not a hot mess. Well, listen, you could be a hot mess, but you don't necessarily. Your whole life is not revolves around being a hot mess. And if it is, you're stuck. And listen, there are a lot of people that have talked people into thinking that they're not worth anything. I don't know where they got it. I don't know if there's this, invisible thing speaking in your ear, wherever that came from. It does not matter. You are worth something. A lot of us have been told a lot of things. Society has placed some people in positions and promoted them, and others, the best promotion is a welfare check. You know what I mean? Hey, listen. We don't want to have to stay there. The idea is you want to outgrow it. You want to try to get your education, go to school, make something of your life. Just you make a decision. If you have a say in it, and if you can. Otherwise, it may take us a little longer to get there. You know what I mean? But the whole idea, and I don't mean to make this into group therapy, but it's become that, okay? I recognize that there are people that have been abused and have lived it. Okay, I recognize that, and fortunately for some of us, we have the capacity to love others. We have the capacity to care. We have the capacity to be there and supportive, and be empathetic and not. No, I don't have. Not every day is not every day is great, actually. But the best thing ever could happen to some of us is that we could reach out to one another, and you could put your cell phone down. You could say, "Listen, this person actually really does mean what they say." I hope I get that message across, because I don't crack under pressure and I don't get upset that easily, but I can tell you after my previous posts, and I was very emotional, and I still am very emotional about this topic when it comes to victims of abuse. And after listening to the story of Kendall, and after listening to one story after another, you can pretty much find out who's who and what's what. The who's who of the world are the ones that got promoted in society, and the idea that some of these agencies or programs or that were fronts for basically just looking at the Jerry Sandusky's of the world, the real creeps, the real jackasses that use and abuse children. I mentioned this to some people. There is not one social service program that can convince me that they're really completely doing what they're doing unless we have verified proof. And most of us are the ones who are going to have to be doing the vetting and checking. That's the way it is. There is not one program that shouldn't be under the microscope when it comes to children. There's just an epidemic of teachers abusing children. There are not enough parents that are yelling. You know what? Our society is so conditioned to just sit there and watch TV, and they're not motivated enough to get up off their butt and do something. And this weekend, you guys are going to do something to change that. Some of you are going to Washington, D.C., and I really hope that some of us can get there. I don't have the money to go there, but my goodness, I hope we can. Because if I have the capacity to get people down there, I have a large vehicle, and we could get to Washington, D.C., and we can crowdfund or do whatever it is to get ourselves down there and help some people to get to Washington, D.C., then so be it. But crowdfunding is the way to go. So if you guys please give to that link below in the description box, I have a large vehicle. So if we get down to Washington, D.C. for the protest for Pizzagate, investigate Pizzagate, that's where it's at for me, because I think people need to be there. You need to show up. And I'm not saying this is not ever going to be about one or two people. We got to be there for each other. I promise you, it's that important to get to Washington, D.C. So if anybody wants to give to that link below, I'm willing to drive. If you're from the Pittsburgh area and you give me your information, and I can, back it up that you verify who you are, and I can improve, and I look at your license and just give me your basic information, I'll take you down to Washington, D.C. I'm not driving anyone down there who doesn't verify who they are, though. I will do background checks. I will not sit there and play games with these people. We want the right people, but I would say everyone needs to start paying attention. These people that sit around and they're waiting for things to change, the only change that is ever going to happen is the change we cause in ourselves. you're waiting for a change, it ain't going to happen because somebody's going to do it for you. It's what you do. It's taking the initiative. It's getting out and branching out and saying, hey, I got to get there. I got to put gas in my car and I got to make it to Washington, D.C. and be there, because that's where you will get the support you need. Okay? I have learned, I've always come away from events, whether it be a pro-life march or rally, I always come away with it better than I started out. It is worth, for someone who's invested this much time in studying and reading and researching these topics and buying Pizzagate gear, that, that t-shirt campaign where investigate Pizzagate. If you go all the way through this and you realize you're not going to go down there, or you're not going to get together with people and you're not going to make friendships out of this, then you're missing out. You really are. You're missing out on the people that you're going to get to know. And I hope you all make a point to crowdfund. I put the crowdfunding link here below in the description box, because I really believe there are people that need to be there. And if you are from the Pittsburgh region and you want to get to the Washington, D.C., please email me. I'll put all the information again in the description box. I know how important it is to get to Washington, D.C. I know how important this is. This is a game changer. For a lot of you, it is make or break it now. Some of you, we cannot afford to live in a country that dismisses abuse as if it's like, oh, they talked about that before. That's not really true. We cannot afford to be around people who've become so cold, so narcissistic, that have only value if you are wearing the right clothes and I mean, that's how ridiculous it's getting. And I just, we can't afford it. No. Listen, hey, just because these people don't want to do something to change their circumstances, and they just go along with abuse and they become part of the problem, not part of the answer, you don't need that. You don't need to be around that. Today, you can walk away from people and say, I'm going to wipe my hands of these people. I have people that care about people. I have people that want to change and do better. You know that old song John Mayer says, waiting for the world to change? That's exactly right. If you're waiting for the world to change, it's not going to change. You got to be the change. We are change, remember? Okay, so I just got off of my soapbox. I didn't mean to say all that, but I mean, listen, if you're going to make a positive impact in someone's life, it's taking that little big leap of faith right now. I promise you, so many of you really need to be hooked up and hooked in and get together and talk on the thread. I mean, I hope you by now believe that none of this, what we do, we're investing our time, is out of we have a purpose behind it. We don't. I'm so grateful that so many of you are making time for one another to make this happen. I really am proud of all of you. I am. And I wanted to share this story because when I say I'm proud of you, you could see from one extreme to the other how many real jerks and how many ruthless people really are out there. And they have nothing but, they're only out for themselves. And that's the way it is. I know for a fact that if anyone lets these people off that easy, a career abuser, they're never going to change. They're too set in their ways. But the reason these victims and survivors are worth it is because there's a possibility that their lives can change for the better. And to me, in a society where it's easy to just dismiss elderly people and infants and children like as if they're like, what do they call that? I don't know, less than subhuman animals. I mean, after report of what's going on in the border, and some people still advocate that the Syrian refugees deserve better treatment. Absolutely, every human being does deserve treatment. But I am not going to reward illegal behavior, especially what they've been finding on the border. When you're finding out they're smuggling victims of child trafficking. I don't know. Maybe it's God's will. I don't know that these people ever had to go through this abuse this way, though. When you see that there's like 3 or 4 people that have been stuffed in a trunk. I agree. Yeah. Humanity, life, that means something. As for the people that abuse people and traffic them, that's a whole nother story. I don't know what else to say. I think that most of us have a pretty good grip that we know that illegal immigration is a serious problem. But no way am I going to sit there and reward bad behavior and let the political policies dominate it. And I don't really believe that that's really what this illegal immigration matter is when you think in terms of the social justice warrior. I don't think they really understand the depths of the problem. And maybe they do. But there are victims of child trafficking and sexual abuse. That's the underhanded issue. That's the dark world that we're dealing with. And this is what people are finding, Border Patrol are finding. They're finding these victims. They're stuffed in trunks and in cages. And to be honest with you, I don't know that I even had, I had no real, I mean, you hear the stories, but you fully don't get it until you see the images. And everyone that survives this has a story. I don't know what condition these victims are in. I don't know what they've survived. But after reading and listening to some of these posts and then the story of Kendall, every story, there's not one story that doesn't, I guess I would say that I'm not even sure I know what to say. I really don't. I really wish I had. I'm happy that I'm happy to see that we're patrolling our borders. I will admit that. Absolutely. I totally get that. But what's behind it and what they're uncovering is incredible. And I don't want to say all that to say, because I totally lost my place here. Where I was getting at with this is that it is about as bad as it. I think it's always been this bad. I think we always had a sick feeling in our gut. But after you hear the story, Kendall, how she was a real life survivor of the Hunger Games and the isolation and the abuse and who knows how many people have really lived this way or taken part and participated in stuff like this. But none of it's, you know what? After you listen, it's like it all starts to click. It's like these people are as bad as, they're that bad. Yeah, this is that bad. And all I can say is that a lot of us are finally getting through. We're finally getting through that. Yeah, this has been going on. A lot of people, if you would have said this 5 years ago, would have said, oh, come on, it's not that bad. This is what people say. Oh, are you sure it's not all in your head? Are you sure you just didn't dream up this story? And luckily you can have, without having to verify it on Snips every day, there's story after story of this going on. And it's stunningly enough, I think it's worse than what we thought. Some people say, oh, you're paranoid. You're just giving up stuff for no reason. Oh, my gosh. Actually, for the first time in my life, I have real peace because I realized this has been going on and we always had a sick feeling. When I met some of these victims and survivors, honestly, I had such peace because I think that's what was always bothered me. It's like I never understood why I had no peace. And then when you meet them, you realize this is why. I knew all along, all my life, that these people existed. And when you see somebody, you realize that that's a person that I've always wondered about. I always wondered if this person ever existed. Because when I met some of the survivors of child pornography, it's like there was so much closure and there was so much peace within me. That's why I really hope all of you get down to Washington, D.C. and be there. Crowdfund, do whatever you can. I'm putting the link below because I am going to crowdfund to get to D.C. and I'd be willing to take a couple people with me if they have, if they have the means to do so, I didn't want to go on and on about all this, but I needed to make I had to make it perfectly clear. There are just so many things about this that we haven't really touched the surface, but I think we're getting somewhere. And yes, I absolutely believe if we have to have group therapy here in order to communicate and demonstrate that we are committed, we're committed. No, you don't know how many things we have tried to overcome to get to where we're at. A lot of people said, Jen, you have been relentless. Listen, when I started looking at the people who pursue Pizzagate the way they do and the stories about DC Pettagate, I recognize I finally found people that are like me, because I have not let up one time, not after what I saw, not after what my sisters lived through. You know, it's very, very hard to listen to my sister who doesn't really remember what she went through. She only remembers parts of the story. But even today, I can see subtle signs that it still is very much buried deep, deep down. And no, there's not enough hypnosis, but prayer is a factor. And when you show love and compassion, you're consistent and you care and you recognize that all I can do is just be there to love her and support her and make sure that she always knows that I have no agenda with her and that I'm there for her. Over time, you gain the trust. And believe me, when I say this, there are people, they may bury their past. They may never really remember everything. They don't have to. It's not, actually, for the whole point of surviving abuse, it is probably better that the brain has the ability to protect itself. Truthfully, that's a coping mechanism, and many people recognize that. But you know, I had to watch my foster mother do this, and personally, I remember everything. That's what's hard, is you can't escape it. But people who've told me that, you know, we made this stuff up, they're just completely outrageous to talk to or listen to them. It doesn't even make sense how anyone can even continue to. I don't know. I just makes no sense to me that anyone would go along with abuse. I don't know that they necessarily believe they're going along with it, but unless people talk about it and say, I can't accept this. This is unacceptable behavior. I cannot, and I'm not afraid to say something. I'm tired of being always criticizing for saying something. Okay? Too many times people don't say anything, and the world's waiting for you're waiting for the world to change. It isn't going to happen. It doesn't happen like that. You have to make it happen. You got to put a stop to it. I know we're not doing it because we want people to say, hey, good thing. That's not the world we live in today. Waiting for the world changes. You'll be waiting for a long time. So get down to Washington, D.C. Be proactive. Show up. That's a great start. The Court of Public Opinion is a part of the Amateur Radio Network.